Hello everyone, I'm Roseveer, and in this video I want to talk about Classic World of Warcraft and more specifically the Season of Mastery, because I honestly don't think I'm going to be playing it because, well, while the changes that they're bringing to Classic World of Warcraft are good, and I actually do like a lot of the changes that they're going to be implementing, some of the changes that I really need to be implemented in order for me to be going back and playing it again aren't even being discussed. In order to keep this video organized, I'm going to break it down into three parts. The first part being changes that I feel like need to be made to the game in order to bring me back to play Classic once again. Because currently, if these changes aren't made, I don't really see myself wanting to go back and play. I probably will, but I don't know. Second are changes that I would like to see made to the game that would bring the game back to the original intent of the original developers. So these are changes that would kind of bring the game design back to the way it was intended to be played. And I'm not talking from a purist standpoint. It's like, play it the way that I want you to play it. I'm talking like the way that the game was originally intended to be played and experienced. I think that there's changes that can be made to the game that would kind of emulate that original experience. And last but not least, part 3, I would really like to talk about some of the changes that I hear from the community. One of them in particular is a rather large change, and I don't think that people really think about the overarching implications of that on the game design and how it would actually kind of tear Classic apart to create this game that we wouldn't really recognize as Classic World of Warcraft. So I'm going to go over those changes. I don't really want those changes to be made, but talk about them and maybe create some discussion in the comment section. The first and most important change to me that would actually get me to come back and play the game regardless of any other change that is made. They could leave the game exactly the way it was and I would come back and play it again if they made this change. And that would just be better moderation within the game. There's no moderation basically at all for players, botters, harassment, anything like that. That's currently in Classic World of Warcraft or just in any real Blizzard game in general. Like, there's no outlet for any of that stuff. Botting is absolutely out of control and it's destroyed the game, in my opinion. Like, I really don't care if they're paying like basically half of the sub numbers. They make the game not fun, and it makes me not interested to play the game if Blizzard's not going to actively try and get rid of the botters. I know they can't get rid of them all the time, but there's plenty of solutions that would fix the botting problem within World of Warcraft, or at least make it much better. Like, you could just put detection software in the game that would detect a bot, throw up a red flag, and that would throw it to an actual person so that they could teleport in game and look at what's going on with that person and confirm whether they're a bot or not, and then just permaban that person. And you could make the software rather robust as far as sensitivity goes, and make it super sensitive to anything that might be botting, and just get rid of people that way. Like, it would just be very simple. You wouldn't have to employ a massive number of people to do it either, because the automation would be flagging these people, and then the actual game master would go and investigate. So I don't really understand why that's such a big deal for Blizzard to do. Yeah, I realize it's going to cost them a little bit of money, but it would make the game much better, and more people would come back and play, including myself. And as an addendum to that, I mentioned some form of better moderation for player harassment and in-game harassment, things like that, because I've been playing games for a really long time. I remember when Xbox Live first came out, and I got into that when I was like 12, and it was just a bunch of people screaming at each other, dropping expletives and stuff that you can't say on YouTube or you'll get banned, so on. Some of the worst things you can possibly imagine, Xbox Live. And anybody who played that at that time, when Xbox Live first came out, you'll know what I'm talking about. It was just awful, right? I grew up then, so I have a pretty thick skin as far as like harassment goes. But within World of Warcraft, and you're playing on the same server all the time, which is one of the best parts of Classic, because you get to know the same people. But that gives people the opportunity to harass you and larger groups of other players. And when you report that harassment, Blizzard basically just tells you to fuck off, which, in my opinion, is unacceptable, especially when there's credible death threats being made and other things like that, as far as contacting people's place of work and stuff like that. And Blizzard's like, well, it's not our problem. It's like, well, you're facilitating the issue, and then you decide to not do anything about it. So I've never had that happen, until Classic World of Warcraft. I've never been harassed in any way like that until Classic WoW. So by far the Classic community, or not just Classic community, but people who play Blizzard games, are by far the most toxic people I have ever played games with in my life. And that's not saying other games aren't toxic, because they are, but there's just something about the Blizzard community and the way that Blizzard fosters their community to be the most toxic environment ever, even though some of their games like Classic WoW are, in my opinion, probably the best game that's ever been made. So that's my main change that I really want, is Blizzard to just take their moderation of their own game more seriously in order to promote a much better environment for people to play in, by getting rid of bots and people who just flat out harass people and do some of the most ridiculous shit I've ever seen. I mean, it's a game, for God's sakes, but yeah, better moderation would be the biggest thing that would actually get me to come back and play Classic again. Moving on to part 2 of the video. So this is changes that I would like to see come to the game, but don't necessarily need to be made. It was just something that would make the game more fun for myself and a bunch of people that I know, because it would kind of bring the game back to its original feel. It would help emulate the original feel of the original game a little bit more. And first off, just flat out making GBID TOS, right? So like just making it so that if you do GBID and you get caught doing a GBID run, you know, and taking part in a GBID run, then you're looking at possibly being, you know, actioned in some way. So because GBID honestly mostly only came into play because of botting in the first place, because of the massive amount of gold that was being pushed into the economy that didn't exist or shouldn't have existed. But it became like this endemic part of Classic World of Warcraft that I feel like just wasn't a whole lot of fun, because it made it so you didn't need to socialize with other players. You could just hop into a run if you had the money, or if you bought the gold or whatever, and, you know, get the gear that you wanted without actually having to play into a social hierarchy of any kind, which was a huge part of Classic World of Warcraft. So it basically just removed that entire section of WoW for a lot of people, and they didn't get to experience what Classic should have been. So it doesn't necessarily make the game worse. I just feel like it would make it better if it didn't exist. So making GBID TOS would be something that I would really like to see. Another change in this category that I would really like to see made would be getting rid of mage boosting entirely. And that's for quite a few reasons, because honestly, mage boosting plays a lot into the botting of World of Warcraft, because it does make the game so much easier to level up. Because honestly, if you see a bot running throughout the game, you can easily tell it's a bot. It's much harder to tell it's a bot if somebody's just, you know, or a potential bot, if somebody uses a mage boosting service to level their character, right? So it's more dangerous to level the character throughout the world botting. You're more likely to get banned, even though, I mean, let's be honest, Blizzard doesn't moderate it. I'm assuming Blizzard has already made that change to moderate their game better. If they make the game, if they moderate the game much better, it would make it so that it would be really difficult to bot yourself up to max level, running through the world, doing quests, whatever. And it would make it so that people would, the bots more likely would just pay for the boosts and then, you know, run their bot, make their gold back, and then start making the return on investment, that kind of thing. So mage boosting is a big problem because of that. It kind of ruins a lot of the experience in the open world. It takes all the people out of the actual world who would just normally be questing and playing the actual game, and, you know, plants them in dungeons so they can sit there and watch Netflix. And sure, it's, you know, a cool way to get leveled up, because it makes the game much easier. The time to level is much faster, all this other stuff. Like, there's a lot of benefits individually, but it ruins the spirit of the game. And that's kind of what part 2 is these changes are trying to kind of fix the spirit of the game. Because, yeah, like mage boosting is just, and they'd have to fix it with paladins too. And a lot of people say that there's a lot of, or there's really no way that they could fix it. And there's plenty of ways you can fix it. You could just make a change so that if, say you're running stockades, for example, if you have somebody who's 8 levels above you within the dungeon, right? 8 or more levels above you within the dungeon, then there's no longer XP available because the level gap is just too big. Like, items won't drop, XP won't drop, you can't get quest rewards, none of that stuff. So it would basically just take out the ability for mages and paladins to boost. And then you have the issue of mages just going in and doing raw gold farms, which is a huge problem as well. Same with paladins, because they have the AoE and whatnot. You can just make it so that if you're solo in a dungeon, then again, no loot, no XP, no gold, nothing drops, anything like that. There's ways around it. There's ways to be able to enforce it. The actual like gold farming, getting raw gold is a little bit more difficult because there's ways around what I just said. You could just bring in like extra people to buff the numbers so that items would drop again. There's ways around it, like I said, but it puts up a roadblock that they have to get around. And then there's other things that you could do to fix it as well. But honestly, I'm not really going to go into those things. This is more just a list of what I would like to see changed. So yeah, that's another thing I would like to see. Get rid of mage boosting and basically try to kill the raw gold farms as much as possible. Because again, it takes away from the spirit of the game because it pushes too much raw gold within or into World of Warcraft that wasn't intended for it to be there, and then that inevitably leads to gold selling, and then that leads to the GBid and all this other stuff. So it just kind of trickled down to kind of changing the game fundamentally into something that it wasn't intended to be. So part 3 is something I'm going to go a little bit more in depth in because it's a change that I don't really want to see made to the game, and if it were made to Classic WoW, I definitely wouldn't come back to play Classic. But yeah, this change is class rebalance. There's a lot of people asking for it, and specifically people from one group are asking for it, and it's mostly people who play Paladins. Now, I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's true. The people who complain the most about class balance is Paladins because they want to play a Ret Paladin, and Ret Paladins suck, right? When they could just be playing a Warrior, which is basically a Ret Paladin, just the way that they want a Ret Paladin to play, somewhat ironically. Without ragging on Paladins too much, it's just kind of the people that I hear talk about it the most. Oh, they need to fix Ret Paladins, they need to rebalance it, so on and so forth. But I've heard it from other people as well. It seems to come mostly from that one group. So, while this is an understandable change that people would want, it changes the game in a fundamental level that I don't really think takes it in a very good way, right? So there's a change that you could make, and a lot of people would, say, "Oh, warrior damage needs to be nerfed." So something you could do to fix that would be to nerf their overall damage just across the board, everything by say 20%, and then buff their rage generation on white hits by 20%. So it kind of offsets the damage reduction that they'll be taking, so that they can generate more rage and use more abilities more early on to kind of offset that. So you could do that, and that wouldn't like hurt the game too much. But the changes that most people would be looking for are changes. Let's just talk about Paladin specifically, because again, these are the people who are generally asking for these changes. Is they want their rebalance so that they can tank or that they can play Ret, or so on and so forth. So let's say that they buff Ret Paladins, right? They increase the damage that Ret Paladins do, so that they're comparable to, let's say they're slightly above Warlocks and Hunters, and they're doing semi-decent damage. They're kind of middle of the pack. That becomes a huge issue because that's kind of where Arms Warriors are currently. So if you take an Arms Warrior and you give him a bubble and you give him a heal, that's basically what a Ret Paladin would be then, right? So it becomes this extremely overpowered juggernaut within PvP, making it so that nobody else can even come close to competing. And if you've played Horde throughout Classic World of Warcraft, you'll know that Paladins are probably, especially a good Paladin, one of the most annoying things to try to kill ever is a good Paladin. And if you give Paladins damage, then you're creating issues for yourself as far as game balance goes. There's a whole reason for the quote-unquote hybrid tax, and that's if you can heal and you have all this utility, then you probably shouldn't do the damage as well. I know that doesn't make a whole lot of sense because there's other classes that aren't technically hybrids, like mages, that do a shitload of damage and have the utility because they're not a hybrid, quote-unquote. So I think if this change were to be made, a better change would be to try to bring others in line with a Ret Paladin, right? So if you just go over each class, look at the class, okay, this class has a lot of utility. They probably shouldn't be doing that much damage if they want the utility. There needs to be kind of a trade-off there, right? Because then, as Blizzard would say, you're making a choice. I'm making air quotes here. You're making a choice then, right? So let's say you're playing a Frost Mage. Well, you have all this control over people so that they can't actually get to you, and they're basically an anti-melee class. Well, you probably shouldn't be doing half of their health with one hit if you crit then, right? Or if you use a Shatter combo. You probably shouldn't be able to do that much damage if you're a Frost Mage, if you have that much control over another class like a Rogue or, say, a Warrior, or any melee class, a Paladin. If you have that much control over the fight and the outcome of the fight, you probably shouldn't have the damage as well. So we could just, say that because they're basically hybrid at that point, they have utility and damage. Should probably nerf the damage or make them pick damage over the utility, right? The other thing would be like looking at rogues. Rogues again have extreme, like a rather extreme amount of utility and outplay potential for other classes, right? Why should they have huge burst with certain specs and all this other stuff if they also have the utility of stealth? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because then they're not being taxed in the same way that Paladins are in PvP and PvE. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So maybe their damage should be brought down a little bit. You see what I'm getting at here? Like the balance of the Paladin currently within the game doesn't make a whole lot of sense within the hybrid tax, because they can do all these other things. They're being taxed more than other classes are, is what I'm trying to say. So that's kind of where the issue comes with the Ret Paladin. And I'm just using Ret Paladin again because it's the most outstanding example. I'm not trying to pick on Ret Paladins. I'm just saying that they have all the utility and none of the damage, and other classes are not similarly taxed in that way. And I think instead of bringing Ret Paladins up and buffing them, it's more interesting to make the change go in the other way in this case and tax everybody in an equal manner, right? So if you have a lot of utility, then you get your damage taxed. If you have no utility, then you don't get your damage taxed, and so on. Like, it just makes more sense to play the game in that manner than to try to bring Paladins up in this case. Because in general, I'm kind of against nerfs. It's more fun to buff a class, because then everybody's having more fun. But Paladins are so difficult to balance because they have that utility. Even in retail, because of all the utility they have, it's really difficult to balance a Paladin, because you're basically just playing a warrior with heals and immune effects and all the utility that warriors do not have, right? So yeah, I think Paladins are probably being overtaxed in comparison to other classes. So again, I don't think that rebalancing is a change that I would like to see. If they were to rebalance it, because I don't trust Blizzard, I don't think they would do a very good job of it. They would probably just look and say, oh, Paladins want buffed, we'll buff them. And then everybody else is going to complain because Paladins are going to be absolute destroyers in PvP. Like, they keep up in PvE, and then in PvP they absolutely dominate, and it just wouldn't be fun for other people to play. So yeah, you got to kind of, I don't know. I don't trust Blizzard to make that change competently so that it wouldn't destroy the game entirely. So yeah, with that being said, I think I kind of got my point across there. Those are the changes that I wanted to talk about most. The changes that Blizzard is looking at making currently, I actually really like those changes, right? So the increasing health or whatever difficulty of raid bosses, no world buffs, all this other stuff kind of has me excited to play Classic again. But then I kind of think about the community and think about all the other changes that I would really like to see made, and they didn't even hint at some of those changes. It's kind of like Classic Season of Mastery kind of feels like a cash grab, right? Like they just want me to resub because they lost so many subs going into this quarter because of the scandal and all this other stuff, just making shitty games and not catering to the customer base, and walking around the offices drunk, making fun of women. Like, unacceptable shit. Like, you know, I can understand the protest. I quit before that, to be honest. Yeah. So getting to the end of this video, I kind of want to talk a little bit about myself and where I'm going to be taking this YouTube channel in the future, seeing as I no longer play World of Warcraft. And I'm not even sure if I'm going to go back to play the Season of Mastery. We'll see, maybe. I definitely want to continue making videos about game design, though. That's kind of where I want to focus, is just game design choices in general, kind of breaking down like the different ideas of game design, similar to what I did similar to what I did in this video just now with the class rebalancing and just the overall effect of class rebalancing on the game, and you know, breaking stuff like that down. I really enjoy doing that and talking about it. It's something that I just like to do. So I'm going to try to do that more about other games. It's a little difficult for me because I like to play a game a lot before I start really breaking down the game design. It takes a while for me to kind of experience the game to the point where I can start making conclusive and definitive decisions as far as like the actual design of the game, and these are the choices they made. This is probably why they made those choices. This is the choice that I would have made in that situation, so on and so forth. These are the repercussions of those decisions, all this other stuff. I really think that's fun. I'm going to continue doing that. It's just going to be a much more like slow roll as far as those videos come out. I do have an idea for a series of videos that I'm thinking about doing here soon, and it's just talking about my unpopular opinions, because honestly, I have a lot of opinions, and specifically a lot of unpopular opinions, and it's kind of fun to play devil's advocate in some ways. Sometimes I just like to argue things that I don't believe just to bug people. So I'm going to be making a video series on that, just unpopular opinions. We'll see where that goes. Yeah, so that's going to be about just about everything. I'm going to try to stay away from politics as much as possible, but we'll see. You know, I might hop into that at some point too. But for the most part, I'm going to be talking about game design and starting a series on unpopular opinions. And those videos should start coming here soon, within the next week or two. Yeah, I might be making a video talking about the game design of New World here soon. I've got about 100 hours into the game as it stands currently, and yeah, I have some thoughts. So yeah, thank you all for watching. I hope to see you in the next one. I'm really sorry for the big gap in videos, because again, I had stopped playing World of Warcraft, and I don't know, was kind of just working through a bunch of stuff emotionally in real life and all this other stuff at the same time. So yeah, things seem like they're starting to get better, and like I was saying earlier, thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next one.